topic is skeleton of the upper limbs. Upper limbs bones are divided into girdle and a free part. The girdle includes two bones, scapula and clavicle. Let's start with the last one, clavicle. Clavicle is a tube-shaped bone. It is also very remarkable because medial part of clavicle is formed during the intramembranous ossification, so it is primary, and the lateral part is developed as the most bones of our body via the intracartilaginous ossification, so it is secondary. The picture shows superior view and inferior view. Clavicle has two ends, sternal and acromial, and a shaft or diaphysis. How to distinguish acromial and sternal ends? Canoid tubercle is situated on the acromial end, which is lateral by the way, and there is an impression of the costoclavicular ligament. On the sternal end, it is medial. So, if I take a look at the clavicle once again, we will realize that this is a right clavicle. The other remarkable landmarks are articular facets on sternal and acromial ends for articulation with the sternum and acromion of the scapula, trapezoid line and subclavian groove. Now let's discuss the medial ligaments and sternoclavicular joint. This picture shows anterior aspect and posterior aspect. Joint between sternal end of clavicle and clavicular facet of the sternum is called sternoclavicular. It is synovial, saddle type. But despite its shape, it works like ball and socket due to the presence of the articular disc between the facets. So it is complex joint working as ball and socket. Ligaments strengthening the joint. Anterior sternoclavicular, costoclavicular, interclavicular, passing between two clavicles, and posterior sternoclavicular, situated on the posterior surface of the thoracic cage. The next bone we are going to discuss is scapula. It is a flat-shaped bone. This picture shows an anterior view, posterior view, and lateral view to the bone. Scapula has a body, head, and neck. There are three borders, medial, lateral, and superior, and two angles, inferior angle and superior angle. Head of scapula composed of glenoid cavity, articular facet for articulation with the humerus, and two tubercles, infraglenoid and supraglenoid. Spine is a landmark situated on the dorsal surface of scapula. It ends in the acromion. It also has a deltoid tubercle. Spine divides the dorsal area into supraspinate fossa and infraspinate. The anterior surface of body is called subscapular fossa. Coracoid process, the point of muscular origin, is situated superiorly to the glenoid cavity. There is scapular notch near to it. Okay, let's describe the ligaments of scapula and lateral ligaments of clavicle, as well as the acromioclavicular joint. Acromioclavicular joint is a plain synovial. The articular surfaces are acromion of scapula and acromial end of clavicle. Ligaments. Coracoclavicular ligament consists of canoid, attaching to the canoid tubercle of clavicle, and trapezoid, attaching to the trapezoid line. Coracoacromial ligament runs between acromion and coracoid process. There is also small ligament known as transverse ligament of scapula. It passes on the top of suprascapular notch and makes the suprascapular foramen, the passageway for suprascapular nerve. The next bone we are going to discuss is humerus. It is a long, tube-shaped bone. It has proximal epiphysis, shaft or diaphysis, and distal epiphysis. Proximal end is composed of head, anatomical neck, two tubercles, greater and lesser, and surgical neck. This bone has two necks. First is morphological and second is clinical. One of the most common type of humeral fracture occurs into the surgical neck. There is also intertubercular groove situated just between the tubercles and two crests, crest of greater tubercle and crest of lesser tubercle. Two landmarks are situated on the shaft of the humerus: deltoid tuberosity, insertion point of the deltoid muscle, and radial groove, radial nerve passing on the radial groove. The distal epiphysis is composed of condyle, epicondyles. Epicondyles are lateral and medial, and three fossae: radial on the lateral side, caranoid on the medial, and olecranon located on the posterior surface. Condyle has two parts: trochlea for the ulnar attachment and capitulum. Capitulum means small head. It is the point of radius attachment. There is also ulnar groove on the backside of the distal epiphysis, situated just between the condyle and medial epicondyle. There are also two crests situated near the epicondyles: lateral supracondylar and medial supracondylar. Humerus participating in the formation of the two joints, glenohumeral or shoulder joint and cubital joint, also known as elbow. Let's talk about the glenohumeral joint first. It is synovial ball and socket. Articular surfaces are glenoid cavity and head of the humerus. Ligaments are coracohumeral ligament, runs between top of coracoid process and major tubercle of humerus, and three capsular ligaments called glenohumeral: superior, middle, and inferior. Let's discuss the forearm. It is composed of two bones. Both are long tube-shaped: ulna, situated medially, and radius, located on the lateral side of the forearm. This picture demonstrates ulna in anterior view, posterior, and lateral views. Ulna has proximal epiphysis, shaft, and distal epiphysis. Proximal epiphysis is composed of coronal process on the anterior surface, olecranon on the backside, and trochlear notch situated between. It is articular facet connecting humerus and ulna. There is also articular facet for radius called radial notch. Ulnar tuberosity serves for the muscle insertion, and there is another insertion point for muscle: supinator crest on the lateral surface. The shaft of ulna has three margins: anterior, posterior, and interosseous, covered by the interosseous membrane. You can also see an attrition foramen. Artery passes here to provide blood supply to the bone. Finally, the distal epiphysis is also called head of ulna. It has styloid process and articular circumference for radius. The next bone is radius. It has head, also called proximal epiphysis, shaft, and distal epiphysis. Radius attaching to the ulna by the articular circumference. Neck is situated below. Radial tuberosity serves as the insertion of the biceps brachii muscle. Shaft has anterior margin, posterior margin situated on the backside, and interosseous, covered by the interosseous membrane. There is a styloid process, point for the radial collateral ligament attachment, and carpal articular surface is situated on the most distal part of distal epiphysis. This surface participates in the radiocarpal joint formation. Now let's talk about cubital or elbow joint. This joint is a combination of three lesser synovial joints: humera ulnar, hinge joint between trochlea of humerus and trochlear notch of ulna; humera radial, ball and socket joint between capitulum of humerus and head of the radius; and proximal radio ulnar, pivot joint between articular circumference of radius and radial notch of ulna. The ligaments of joint are ulnar collateral and radial collateral. Annular ligament runs around the neck of radius. The next thing we are going to discuss is hand. This is left hand. Left picture is palmar side or anterior. Right picture is dorsal side or posterior. There are 8 spongy bones and 19 tube-shaped. Hand is divided into carpal area, metacarpal, and fingers. The carpal bones are scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate. She looks too pretty, try to catch her. Some landmarks here: hook of hamate, head of capitate, tubercle of trapezium. Each metacarpal bone has the same parts in it: base, body, and head. We can see 2 special bones in this area, sesamoid. They don't have specific names, so we can call them according to their type. Sesamoid bone is a small spongy bone located within the ligament or muscular tendon. They help in the muscular movements. Pisiform bone, by the way, is also sesamoid. Phalanges are proximal, middle, and distal. Thumb has only 2 phalanges, proximal and distal. Each phalanx has base, body or shaft, and head. Let's speak about the joints of hand and distal forearm. Joint between ulnar notch of radius and ulnar articular circumference is called distal radioulnar. It is synovial, pivot, associated and combined with proximal radioulnar joint. Radiocarpal joint, synovial condyloid, between radial articular surface and 3 proximal carpal bones, scaphoid, lunate, and triquetrum. Midcarpal joint is a joint between proximal and distal rows of carpal bones. It is a combination of lesser joint like scaphocapitate articulation. Carpometacarpal joints are plain synovial. Metacarpophalangeal are condyloid type synovial articulations, and interphalangeal are hinge. Let's take a look at the ligaments of the hand. There are 2 major groups, palmar and dorsal. Dorsal radioulnar and palmar radioulnar connect the ulna and radius. Ulnar carpal collateral and radial carpal collateral, strengthening the radiocarpal joint from the sides. Dorsal radiocarpal runs between radius and hamate bone. Palmar radiocarpal attached to the palmar side of midcarpal capsule. Palmar ulnar carpal runs near to the previous one. Next row of ligaments. Palmar intercarpal starts on capitate bone and runs in different directions. Dorsal intercarpal goes from lateral to medial side of the wrist. Dorsal carpometacarpal connect the distal row of carpal bones and bases of metacarpal. Palmar carpometacarpal have the same direction but on opposite side. Dorsal metacarpal and palmar metacarpal connect the base part of metacarpal bones. Deep transverse metacarpal connects the heads of the metacarpals. And finally, collateral ligaments run on lateral sides of every joint distally to carpal area and called according to their position. That's all. Thank you for watching this video.